the Overwatch 2 developers have just dropped a new piece talking about the matchmaker and the competitive system. As most of you know, the matchmaking is a little bit flawed at the moment, just to say the least. So the fact that we are getting developer updates right now is a huge step forward in communication and helping us understand what they are thinking and, well, figuring out how to fix it. Christmas time is here and Santa has left in your stocking an easy and quick way to get to GM. There has never been a better time to get your membership to GameLeap.com. You can use code SANTA at checkout and get 50% off. Not only that, not only will you get access to everything, but 10 people will be picked for a free VOD review from our top coaches. That is an insane amount of value, so hurry up and click on the link right now and get your membership today. On the Overwatch official website, they have made a post that says, "Hello heroes. In the first part of our two-part deep dive on matchmaking and competitive, we'll look at how matchmaking works under the hood and answer some outstanding questions around how MMR is determined and factored into the system. Ultimately, the goal of the matchmaker is to create as fair a match as possible across all game modes. We know matchmaking can be a source of frustration, especially in competitive, and we'd like to recognize it doesn't always feel like it's meeting its goal." This is great because it is directly in line with what Blizzard had said before. They've been talking about doing an overhaul or at least making some major changes to the matchmaking system itself in previous posts and in previous patches. So hopefully we get a little bit more clarity on exactly what those changes might look like very soon. So they're going to go on to talk about the MMR system. I'm going to read through it. Just bear with me because at the end it does have some very interesting changes that they are looking to implement, at least to quick play, which I imagine might come to competitive if they end up working well. So they go on to talk about the internal matchmaking rating, or MMR, and this essentially is what is used to determine how you are placed in a quick play match. For those of you that don't play a ton of quick play, basically there is essentially a hidden SR system, that's the best way to describe it, where it is going to pair you up against people who perform similarly to where you are. It looks like, judging off of this graph here, you're given a rating from anywhere from -6 to 6.0, and it looks like most people kind of fall in that -0.5 range. They go on to say your MMR will rise over time if you improve your skill and win more games against players of your current MMR level. All our game modes, including competitive, okay, that's interesting. I haven't read this yet. You're hearing me read this live. So they say, including competitive, only look at MMR when forming a match. We never use your outward-facing skill tier or division to form matches. Likewise, the rank you see in a player's profile isn't the same as their MMR. Okay, so this actually does support my theory before, where a lot of the time where people are like, how do I have a gold player in my lobby? It's because as they are going through the, whatever you want to call it, the 7-win process or the 20-loss process, their rank is adjusting each game, even though it's not showing each game, it is adjusting game after game. So this essentially ends up resulting in a gold player being in a Grandmaster lobby, or vice versa. If they're gaining enough SR or they're gaining enough wins that they are being pushed and elevated up the ladder, then that's what happens. So them saying that we never use your outward facing skill tier or division to form matches, and likewise the rank you see in a player's profile isn't the same as their MMR, seems to be a direct response to that complaint a lot of Grandmaster streamers have been having. They go on to say, we only adjust your MMR after you win or lose a game, or if you come back after not playing for a long time. That's of course called decay. Your MMR is unaffected when we lower your rank at the beginning of a season, and everyone in your matches has a similar MMR as you. Initial ranked matches can feel turbulent because many players return at the beginning of a season, and anything that changes player population is going to affect the matchmaker. It is important to remember that our teammates are human. We don't always perform the same from game to game, or even team fight to team fight. This inherent variance in our individual performance means that the matchmaker needs the results of as many games as possible to get an accurate representation of your skill. Okay, so while that last bit of course makes sense, you know, everyone has a variance in how they perform over time, it doesn't make a ton of sense to me to have an MMR system that doesn't apply to your rank, I guess. Because in my mind, of course this might not be how it works, I might just be misinterpreting this, but that means that there would be a ton of variation in each skill division. For example, you're going to have players that end up performing like a diamond player would, who have the MMR of a diamond player but are getting paired against other people who are performing at that level in gold, whereas you could also have people who are, you know, potentially inflated in the rank, people who are playing like bronze but they're also playing against people who are playing like bronze in gold. And what you end up having is essentially a dichotomy where two people people who are gold SR would be playing totally different games. They would be performing completely differently, and that doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So I'm interested to see how they continue developing on explaining this, I guess. It's also possible that I'm wrong about this. I'm interested to hear what you guys think. Please comment and tell me if you think I'm wrong about this, but I feel like it would just create two different versions of gold, where people who are really good in gold are playing against people who are really good in gold, and then because the MMR system is trying to lock them into a very even match, they're going to just maintain that 50-50 win rate, and vice versa for someone who's really bad for gold, someone who's, you know, supposed to be a bronze player but is playing in gold. It's an interesting thing to think about. I don't know if it's actually how it works in practice, but I'm curious what you guys think, so tell me about it in the comments. Okay, so moving on, they talk about skill variation within groups, and this has been a major complaint with Overwatch, is that people who are good at the game are struggling to play with their friends who are probably worse at the game. And what ends up happening is you have one person who is essentially shouldering the load as far as the average MMR goes, and are just like pulling everyone up into these really difficult games where the bad players don't feel like they can do anything. They feel like they're playing against people who are way better than them, and that's just not fun. So this is a real problem, because that's essentially starting to isolate the casual base. You're starting to remove people's ability to play with their friends and group up and go and, you know, have a great time together. So this is definitely something that needs to be talked about, is when someone who is Grandmaster wants to go and casually play with their bronze friends. How do you find a way to balance that? So they go on to say, when players group together, there's the possibility that the group has a larger skill difference than a match we'd typically like to make. So like I said, if you're a Grandmaster player playing with like gold, those of you at the very highest level might notice these skill differences more too, because there's far fewer players at the top of the MMR curve. We can't always avoid these types of matches, but we can make them feel better. These matches can often feel imbalanced if they create situations where there's a large disparity of skill within a single role between the two teams. For example, we might match a highly rated tank against a comparably lower rated tank, so even if the overall match is balanced, the competition between tanks feels very one-sided. Which is interesting that they chose the tank role to mention, because oftentimes tanks are so vital that they determine the outcome of a game, so it's very important that the tanks are evenly matched as opposed to, say, the supports. Anyway, continuing, they say we've got changes coming to the game over the next few months which will dramatically reduce these disparities. We'll try to find pairs of similarly rated players in each role when making a match. For support and damage roles, which have 2 slots, each player will be paired with 1 player on the opposite team. There will sometimes be matches with a large range of differently skilled players, but in these cases, the 2 teams will be more like mirror images of each other. So if one team has a bronze player, the other team has a bronze player. And if one team has a GM player, the other team has a GM player. So even if they're playing, you know, a GM versus a bronze, there's also a counterpart that is equal. They go on to say, however, even with these improvements, there will always be times when we make matches that have a skill disparity that isn't reflected in MMRs, because some players in the match aren't calibrated. We've seen this much more frequently since Overwatch 2 launched, and we welcomed a large influx of new players. This essentially is just saying that they haven't played enough games, or they just don't play frequently enough for the matchmaker to give them an accurate representation of their skill. To be 100% honest with you, it feels a little bit like a cop-out. Like, I get it, right? If you have a smaller data set to work from, you're gonna have worse results. But at the same time, you have to implement something. You have to build a failsafe into the system to try to at least reduce that. So hopefully they talk about that some going forward, because the next paragraph is titled Setting Up New Players for Success, so I'm guessing they are going to discuss that a little bit. They say Overwatch 2 is a lot to learn. It's a fast team-based hero shooter where players juggle the gameplay of a traditional FPS, the unique abilities of a diverse hero roster, and many different types of game modes and maps. We've tackled the learning curve from multiple directions to help ease new players into Overwatch 2. The most visible change was adding the first-time user experience at launch, but there's also an invisible change we've been working on in the background, better matchmaking for new players. We noticed that players were losing their initial matches much more than they should have, and this trend wasn't leveling out enough by the time they played many more matches. The win rates of new players should be normally distributed, meaning that most should be hovering around a 50% win rate, but instead the distribution was skewed, with many players losing at higher rates. They go on to say, I'm just going to paraphrase the rest of this, but they pretty much go on to say that they would originally place people around silver, and that was still not cutting it enough. They were still losing too much, so they ended up moving it to bronze 5, and they saw a huge improvement for new players as far as win rate goes, which honestly, okay, that's fine, but you're placing them in the lowest rank possible, so of course their win rate is going to get better. My assumption is that this change has been in the game for a while, because a lot of people were originally getting placed in bronze 5 when they first came to Overwatch. A lot of streamers, especially if you remember like the early days of Overwatch. So they went on to say that the second change they implemented was aimed at players who did not belong at the initial MMR, so something like a Smurf or someone who came from another FPS. Initial matches are weighted differently than standard matches because they increase and decrease MMR at a much higher rate than usual. They pretty much did this to avoid someone who's really good just stomping, matches for hours and hours and hours on end. But that still wasn't enough. They said that it was still taking a lot of games for players to get where they belonged. So to improve this, they added a streak modifier system that tracks a moving average of a player's win rate. When a player wins more than 50% of their matches, we start to increase their MMR faster. This levels out once we see the player's MMR value has them joining fair matches, which corresponds to a 50 win rate. With this change, we've seen that new and returning players reach a 50% win rate with much fewer matches than before. So back in Overwatch 1, a lot of people used to make new accounts to try to get out of elo hell because they thought, okay, if I just win a bunch of early games, I'll be able to soar up the ranks and I'll be good to go. But it wasn't exactly true, because once you got to, plat or diamond, your rank would not be boosted anymore. You would not be gaining 100 SR per match. You'd still be gaining like 20, except now you're in a higher rank and you're going to be losing more because honestly you didn't deserve that rank in the first place. So the concern with this new system is that not only do you get your initial boost from your early matches, from your placement matches, and from your early wins, but on top of that you're also going to get a increased velocity if you go on a win streak. Honestly, it's going to battle Smurfs pretty well, but I'm really worried that a bunch of people are going to start just trying to spam new accounts so they can just get a rank that they don't deserve. But I can genuinely say that overall these are some good changes, and it's definitely good that we're at least having communication so we can all voice our opinions on the matter and talk about, what makes it good, what makes it bad, and what we would like to see moving forward. And based off of Blizzard saying we think this is a huge improvement to the new player experience, there will be more information on updates in the future, but until then, please keep sharing your feedback. It's our most valuable development resource. It sounds like they agree. I don't know if these are the only two changes, because they did say that coming into the next season, they are going to end up making some big changes to the matchmaking system and hopefully making competitive a lot more fun for a lot of people. I'm not sure if this is all they meant or if they have more things planned down the road, or if they're going to communicate more in the meantime. In any case, be sure you like and subscribe. That way I can update you as soon as possible and give you my thoughts on things and what I see going forward for Overwatch. And I will see you all again for the next update. Take care and peace. Christmas time is here, and Santa has left in your stocking an easy and quick way to get to GM. There has never been a better time to get your membership to GameLeap.com. You can use code SANTA at checkout and get 50% off. Not only that, not only will you get access to everything, but 10 people will be picked for a free VOD review from our top coaches. That is an insane amount of value, so hurry up and click on the link right now and get your membership today.